Ukraine, Ukrainian Army General, former advisor to the President of Ukraine.
Conflict development in Ukraine, how the conflict will and could evolve, and the prerequisites of a new possible war. Дуже прошу вас, пане Миколо.
Дуже дякую. Thank you very much. Я хочу наголосити.
I would like to emphasize that even those latest events taking place last week certify to the fact that Russian Federation and militants of DPR will start a large-scale invasion on the territories which are controlled by the armed forces of Ukraine. But in the beginning there were indications that there were Putin said that there were no plans like that, but all the experts, all the observers, NATO, military, and others say that this will be happening. We need to realistically assess the situation, give a realistic assessment, and we said that there will be no such invasion, but activization of the militants and the reinforcing of the territories that they control, and all their operations are directed to strategic objects. And before the G20 summit, Putin was not ready to risk and start large-scale invasion on the territory of our state. But I would like to go back to our history, the recent history. Why till now we have this big problem? Why could not we resolve the issue of stabilizing the situation in the East, and why could not we prevent the military and security threat? We started, and we had already meetings with you. We started this format of settlement along 15 items, and this program of settlement was to be oriented to international support of the first level. We indicated that participants of such a format should be the countries like USA, European Union, the countries of G7 or G20, which will develop a very clear roadmap and the full control of the border, and the International Commission, which are representatives of the US, European Union, OSCE, Ukraine, and Russia. And then online will be able to ensure the control over the border and also identification of foreign troops and mercenaries which are on the territory of Lugansk and Donetsk regions, their withdrawal along humanitarian corridors, and also surrender of the militants. And then there should be a dialogue on restoring Donbass, on healing the wounds, and on investment projects which will create conditions for development of this region and will provide jobs in this region. This did not happen. I can tell you that that was a big mistake, not just of our leadership, but strategic mistake of our Western partners, because Putin will never follow these positions that he is stating about when he says about international fora. When in Minsk he suggested his 12 items. We have this weakest Minsk format, which is attractive, but that is the format of Putin. And later, we told that is format of Putin, which is being implemented as to legalizing these territories which are occupied by terrorists via so-called elections. These are establishing new system of administration and local elections, establishing the system of justice, of law enforcement bodies, the special service which control the territory.
In future, this is a ground to broaden those territories to Luhansk and Donetsk region as a minimum. So it went along those lines. We tried to provide for the fulfillment of those points, but without any real control and any powerful mechanism and systematic actions of international players like representatives of USA, Europe, Ukraine, and Russia. This could not happen. Then we emphasized again for the leaders of our country and leaders of Europe that the fulfillment of Minsk agreements will be zero. There are thousands of killed, almost 3,000 of violations of ceasefire. On some directions, the militants have moved 20, 30, and in some places 70 kilometers forward from the delineation line of the 5th of September. We know clearly the plans of Russia and the so-called LNR, DNR. They aim at seizing new objects, the Donetsk airport, the Pesky, Avdiivka, Shastya, Debaltsevo, Mariupol cities. There are 8 major strategic objects in the crosshairs of the Russian and militants. Why there was the sending of new forces? Because the militants have told Kremlin that they have not enough forces to seize the Debaltsevo airport or Mariupol. So last week they were sending tanks and APCs and new special forces personnel to Ukrainian territories, and the so-called humanitarian convoys included not just food or ammunition, but also munitions, and those are special units that were trained in Russia and are equipped with the 5th or 6th generation of armaments. Those are very efficient combat units. They where 1,000 men can perform the task usually performed by 10,000. So we think that the consolidation of efforts of international public on the first level, and I emphasize that the first level is the leaders of G20 or G7, presidents, premiers, the chancellor. Only in this format we can reach a powerful model of settlement, of bringing Putin to peace, but not only by means of sanctions or, for instance, instructions from Australia, who demanded that Putin should withdraw troops. This is very correct, but I tell you again that we should suggest a new format of the settlement of the situation, and this is the format where people with whom Mr. Putin will have to take into account. I also know Mr. Putin very well personally. Only under such powerful pressure of the leaders of the countries of the world and arguments about the development of the situation. You know, we are facing the global crisis because Russia is in Baltics, in Eastern Europe, and they are in Southeast with their strategic bombers, and this is the threat of a global war. And of course, this is a prerequisite of the dissolution of territories, not only of Ukraine, but of Russia and third countries. Again, very critical conditions are now in the economy of Russia, especially where oil is concerned. I emphasize once again that we contact with the Russian officials is they say that if the price for oil falls lower than $70 per barrel, the economy of Russia will fall as well and lead to social explosions. So the first leaders of the countries of the world should talk to Putin, telling him that the root of the problem is in Ukraine, and to create not a weak group of OSCE with 2 drones, but a very powerful group with the participation of G7 or G20, space control over every meter of the border, and then the full identification of foreign troops and mercenaries on the territory of Ukraine in the so-called DNR and LNR, and then their withdrawal through humanitarian corridors, and then the talks on the laying down of arms by militants. This is a working format, and we have to involve Donbass plans to restore the infrastructures and kindergartens and schools, to create new jobs. The process will start, but only after, when we get out of the impasse. Some people say, let's pressure Putin, but I'll tell you that you cannot pressure him by this only means. He will, until the end, preserve the aggressive policy, and even when their economy falls, he will still very powerfully oppose the West. We have to come to a complicated but efficient political dialogue, which will make Putin to seek the way out of the impasse, and we should do this every day at the where they work every day in online regime over the entire. We're very pleased to welcome you to the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. As an expert, do we have questions? Yes, please introduce yourself. Artem Lysak, 24 News Channel. You're talking about the dialogue. Isn't it happening now? Isn't there pressure on Putin? And I wonder if the West has technical opportunities to do what you tell. In principle, the strategically incorrect approach to the negotiation process. We were in different, very complicated situations up to the war with Russia in 2008, but the negotiators were on the first level, and the Russian Federation was critically interested, and under the influence not only of the threat, but also under the influence of the interests of not allowing the global war. We, as a rule, when the European leaders, G20 leaders, address us, they say that you in Ukraine, they say to Putin, you are supporting illegal formations, but this will not influence Putin. You should talk the leaders of strategic level when they talk about global problems, the opposition on a nuclear level where Putin is critically interested, and then we say that the root of the matter is in Ukraine. Let's first close the issues in Ukraine. You should not only accuse him. This won't work. This is an unreal option. It will work when we will talk about the dangers that are that pertain to everybody, and then we talk about real things that should be settled in Ukraine. When you talk about the new format of negotiations, are you talking about some specific formats like Geneva format? We have lost the Geneva format, so there should be a new format. It won't be a Geneva format, probably G7 leaders, maybe EU, OSCE, Putin and Poroshenko. This is going to be another format, but it will be accepted. And we should get away from Russia's statement that they won't work in Geneva format. but we should go to a new level of motivation about which I talked. So the only format of settlement of the situation in Ukraine won't work. There will be a continuation of the local war. There will be a desire to break through to the territory. I have two questions about OSCE. On the 15th of November, OSCE proposed their option of the settlement of the conflict, the stage-by-stage withdrawal of forces, but last week we heard a lot of accusations against OSCE about, for instance, informing the enemy about the situation of Ukrainian troops. What is your idea about accusations against OSCE? I want to tell you that on tactical level, OSCE does perform their function. We should respect this organization that does what they can, but of course there is a lot of remarks on their side. They remove some sharp problems, but the level is very low. And then the accusations are ungrounded 99%. But why they have arisen? Russian Federation and other countries are efficiently using the formats of international organizations, including OSCE. When in fact there's a war with Ukraine, they send their special services representatives who efficiently use these organizations in order to inform the militants. They set personal contacts on the level of operatives of OSCE who have some close relations, and we already see that they want to remove those people. We have conducted a huge analysis. In fact, all our partners except Russia are normal and very well-trained specialists, and they provide objective information, but sometimes they cannot provide work normally because concrete situation influence on them. On the one hand, they have militants, on the other hand, they have Russia, but the global accusations are ungrounded. Of course, our special services should detect specific agents of Russian Federation and demand their rotation.
Yes, one more question. Uninformed agency. The threat of use of nuclear weapons, is that a manipulation? We've heard that in your words already. How possible is it? What could be the actions of the state in this case? According to our data, Putin is not ready to use nuclear weapons because he understands this will mean the global war, and that's the threat to the whole humanity. But he will be using these threats till the extreme. He will be demonstrating that it is possible to do that. He will be demonstrating big missiles, the aircraft, the submarines, which are near Sweden, near the United States coast, and he will be using all that. Putin stated that he will use asymmetric methods of opposing NATO countries. He says we are smaller, NATO countries are bigger, but we have the modern weapons, including nuclear, which we will use in critical moment. But the precondition of that is if NATO countries use their weapons, this will be Cold War confrontation. He will be demonstrating his forces, including nuclear forces. But we say that Russian Federation is not ready to use this. He's threatening, yes, but they're threatening, yes, but that is the mechanism for further negotiation. This will lead to global counterposition and global losses, and the main format, the format I mentioned in the beginning is the main one. Interfax, do you have any data that who influences decision making? I mean the president and the latest sanctions, the international pressure, has it really forced to regroup the groups of influence? Is it our president, you mean, or Russian president? There are two big groups of influence. Military, first of all, head of the FSB, the external service, external intelligence service, secretary of the Russian Security and Defense Council, Shoigu, the Minister of Defense. This is the group of people who form this position of occupying the territories. They are supporting the large-scale operations in the south of Ukraine and change of the leadership, and that is the global plan. Having contacts in the period of Crimean events and the Eastern events, the more loyal, that means that who influences Putin are 5 or 6 persons who have very aggressive intentions. These intentions have been implemented, but now, after the losses and some mistakes committed in the south, especially when the Lugansk, Donetsk, Kharkiv regions, Dnipropetrovsk regions, when they believe that people there will be welcoming people, now Putin believes that he will be reassessing the situation. And now these conflicts will be frozen, and they are trying to force the leadership of our state to conduct negotiations between the leaders of Lugansk and Donetsk republics and to establish certain status quo. And I mean Abkhazia option and Transnistria option, and they will be either working in this format, destabilizing the situation in Ukraine. Part of that is Medvedev and his surrounding. They are forming the position to stop, to press us on negotiation processes, and with the Donetsk and Lugansk republics, the format is not to return to independence of our state, but they want to return to the format of insulation and working with Crimea and Donetsk and Lugansk republics as independent entities. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time left for questions, but we'll continue to invite you to Ukrainian Crisis Media Center.